this class was supposed to be in the farm kitchen at Lusher Farm. And, because everything's going virtual, that we decided to take it on here instead of just cancel it altogether or wait for it to reopen. So all of you know me, but not all of you know Megan. And I guess we're live, so not everybody knows me. I'll just give a brief introduction for who we are. So Megan and I met 5 years ago when my oldest and her youngest were in kindergarten together. And we found out that we have the same degree, master's in nutrition from naturopathic schools. So mine is from Bastyr and Megan's is from NUNM here in Portland. And so we have very similar philosophies on nutrition. We shared a nutrition office for a while where we saw clients and have just done a lot of really fun things over the years, this now being our latest. So I'm excited to share space with you again in the kitchen, Megan, even if it's virtual.
Yeah, no, happy to be back together like this.
And so today, I think typically we'll go through and introduce, have some kind of like community sharing, but since we're live today, we're gonna keep it, we'll just jump right into the material. So each week we're going to have a theme. And the theme that we're working with this week is cooked versus raw. This is something that we're often brought as a question in our practice. Is it better to eat food cooked or is it better to eat it raw? A lot of people have this idea that it's better to eat food raw because you don't destroy nutrients while cooking. And the answer is really that we need both. We need it to be cooked and raw. And so one of the things that happens when you cook is that when you cook a vegetable is that you increase digestion, you increase the ability of your body to digest it. You increase bioavailability by breaking down the food in the cooking process. So the nutrients within the vegetable are able to be better absorbed. And so you enhance certain nutrients. You do destroy certain nutrients, but you also enhance others. And so a couple examples of that are tomatoes. When you cook tomatoes, you decrease vitamin C a lot, but you also increase lycopene, which is a bioactive compound, an antioxidant in tomatoes. And so you get a lot more of that and less of another nutrient. Carrots are another example. When you cook them, you decrease the polyphenols, another antioxidant, but you increase the carotenoids by as much as 70 to 75%. When you have uncooked food, or uncooked produce, you maybe can't digest them in the same way, but it increases digestion. So you are able to, when you have the raw produce, it increases enzyme production in the body, which is helpful for digestion. And so having a little bit of something raw, if you have cooked vegetables and something raw added to that, then you're able to get the best of both worlds. So our answer is always to have both, to have a little bit of cooked and to have raw, and to have, tomatoes sometimes raw and tomatoes sometimes cooked, and your carrots sometimes raw and your carrots sometimes cooked, and really blend it up. And with each meal, ideally having some cooked and some raw, again, to get best of both worlds digestion-wise. And, one thing too to think about is that when you're cooking, with fat-soluble vitamins, you need fat in there. So it's another good reason to think about having a broad spectrum of those macronutrients and make sure you get some fat when you're cooking with vegetables or eating vegetables. And so the overall answer is that you really need both. You need the cooked and you need the raw. And one, philosophy, it's kind of like in life. We were thinking, Megan and I were talking about how as just a philosophy in life, we need that too, right? We need this cooked bit of wisdom that is in the kitchen, is handed down through years and years and years of experimentation, but we also need the raw creativity that comes from innovation and thinking in new ways. And so bringing those two things together as we cook, and one of the ways we do that is to bring the raw and the cooked together. So that's kind of our idea, and that's our theme for today, and that's going to flow into the rest of our class. So I think maybe now you're going to do a little overview, right, of what we got in the CSA this week, and this will probably look kind of like what's available if you're in the Northwest region right now.
Yeah, so let me know. I'm going to move you up here so we hopefully have a better angle, but let me know if you're not able to hear me well. I will speak up. But I don't know about you, Katrina, but today it felt like Christmas morning for me again, because it's been a month that we've had this break of not having our CSA because there was a little bit of between the winter share and the summer share. So today it was like Christmas, and I was so excited to be here again getting these beautiful veggies. So I'm going to show you what we got in our share, and some of you may have the same, some different, but it could be similar. What you'll notice is some of the vegetables are sort of crossing over between winter to the spring and summer. So first off, we have this lovely winter squash, a tetsu squash. It's a Japanese squash, and something I love about it is that it's firmer than say like a butternut squash. I love butternut squash, but it has more water content, so it breaks down, and so it's great for soups and everything. This really holds its texture, so if you roast it, you can easily still dice it up, throw it on top of a bowl, use it in stews, and it won't break down too much. Also, one of my favorite ways to do this in simplest is just to slice it in half and then take out the seeds, slice it, roast it with some individual slices with olive oil or avocado oil in your oven, about 400 degrees with some salt, and the skins get soft enough you can eat them. You don't have to discard that. So a lot of nutrients in the skin. So that's an exciting one to have this week. Also, we got this beautiful chard, which I just love. You see the deep greens and purple. Chard is such an easy one to use as saute greens. You can add it to soup, to stews. If you're going to saute, I like to remove the leaves and saute the stems first because they're a little tougher, but they're still delicious. But just saute them first and then add the greens because they'll just cook really nicely and really quick. So that was beautiful. Check out this cauliflower. This is only half of a cauliflower. It's so beautiful and I don't
That's
know.
a big one.
I think cauliflower kind of in kale, right? Like you can do anything with it. So we there's cauliflower pizza crust, cauliflower rice, even cauliflower steak. So to me, this is super versatile. One thing you'll notice, there's a little bit of browning right here. It's not an issue at all. You just trim that off. To me, I like my produce like I like my people, real and imperfect. So it's still delicious. Just slice a little off and just use it as you would. Leeks. Oh my goodness. Leeks have become a favorite in our house. I hadn't used them a lot before joining the CFA a few years ago because it's a vegetable in the store I didn't think to pick up too often, but they are amazing. So you just slice off the end here, slice off the top green leaves, and then they can often be pretty dirty because the dirt will settle into them. So you can either slice them lengthwise or chop them as rings, and then put them in a bowl with cold water just to rinse the dirt off, and then spin it, salad spinner, or let them dry. One of our favorite ways to use it is just, again, slice them like that, toss them with a little olive oil and salt and roast them, and it's like a mini onion ring, but healthy. And you can toss your bowls with it, salad, soup, eggs, we like to use coconut oil, but you can use olive oil or avocado oil. Put a little on the stove, put a couple of kernels in until they start popping. Put a lid on, put the rest of your popcorn, you don't want to cover the bottom too much, it needs room to pop. But then put a lid on and shake it up and just let it pop. It's so simple. Toss it with some sea salt, some nutritional yeast if you want like a cheesy flavor. It's just so easy and really delicious. But sometimes we also get our popcorn on the cob, which is super fun too. And you can actually pop it in the microwave in a paper bag. Just don't put it in for too long because you could burn your house on fire, which I almost did once. But about a minute and a half, a minute and 45 seconds in the microwave, and open the bag and you go pop popcorn. It's super fun. So those are the ingredients we got this week. I get a whole share, so I've got about double what you see here. And it's just so fun to have the fresh veggies back in the fridge, back on the counter. I appreciate it even more this week after the month of buying it from the store, where before I would just count on it being there. Some ways that we love to use this. Sometimes you can get the CSA and you're going, oh boy, now what do I do with it? And really it's fun to think of, instead of meal planning before you get your ingredients, looking at your ingredients and then meal planning. So some ways we would think about doing this would be, so the cauliflower and leek, you could make a gratin with this and top it with some pine nuts, some sprinkled parsley on top after it's out, and that would be delicious and really savory. The squash, to me, you could do a cauliflower rice, the squash, some red potatoes, and make a yellow curry. And again, parsley over the top of that, maybe some roasted leeks on top too. One of my favorite things for breakfast is to do like some sauteed greens with onions. So anytime if you're thinking, what can I do with a leek? When would you need an onion? You can easily replace an onion. It's just an onion, just in a different form than you might be used to. So saute it up with some greens, maybe throw some eggs on top. That's a delicious breakfast. And then today's recipe that I'd really like to highlight is we're going to make a chimichurri, which is really funny because when we saw the list of what was in the CSA, both Katrina and I immediately said, we've got to make chimichurri. The chimichurri is a sauce or a dip. It's just this delicious blend of greens and garlic and olive oil, and you can really customize it. It's super versatile. If you like a little heat, you can add some red chili flakes. If you like a lot of garlic, add more. A little salty, add some capers, but it's super versatile and it can be used on fish. It's delicious over chicken. It's really popular with steak, but it's also delicious over roasted veggies or as a dip, as a sandwich spread, and topped with pasta. So sometimes people look at parsley and they're not sure what to do with it. Today we're going to show you how to make a chimichurri with it. And then we're going to use our simple red potatoes, roast them up, and put the chimichurri over the top. So it changes from an everyday dinner with roasted red potatoes to, oh my gosh, the quarantine's over, we're having company, let's throw some chimichurri on top kind of dinner. So, Katrina, with that,
all right.
you take it away.
Thanks, Megan. I'm gonna just put the phone back up here. Okay, so as Megan said, we're gonna make crispy roasted potato today. Roasted potatoes are, a really common, easy thing to do, but we wanted to highlight today a couple tips on how to make them really crispy, because there's a couple things that sometimes people don't know about, even though it's something that you make pretty often. So I'm gonna go ahead and start slicing the potatoes. And one of the things that's really important to do when you have already washed them, not that I feel like you have to wash things like too well when they're from the CSA. I feel a lot more comfortable leaving a little bit of that dirt on, knowing that I am getting some good probiotics from it, and I don't feel as worried about what might be on it when it comes from a local source and someone that I know. So one of the first tips for making roasted potatoes is to cut the pieces equally so that they can evenly roast as they cook. So cutting them lengthwise first, and then I'm just making a simple cube and trying to get, it's not going to be perfect, and that's something that I think when you're cooking, it's really important to remember that things don't have to be typically, usually with baking maybe a little bit more, but typically they don't have to be perfect. So knowing that you can just do your best and not have to worry too much about it, but it does help the more even you can get the slices. And then the next step for making really crispy potatoes, and this actually goes for almost any root vegetable that you're trying to crisp up, because you can do all kinds of things with like sweet potatoes or yucca root. One of the things, we're going to skip this up today just because it'll be too time consuming, but you can soak it in a cold bath of ice water for at least 30 minutes, and that helps to remove the starch a little bit, and that'll help with crisping it up more. So you can do even up to overnight if you wanted to with them in the refrigerator, but at least 30 minutes in a cold water bath will help to really crisp them up. And then the thing that you want to make sure is that you rinse them and then drain it and pat them dry before you move into the next part. So the next tip, what we're going to do actually next is just put olive oil, mix them with a little bit of olive oil, and you can also use avocado oil. I like to roast them around somewhere between 375 and 425. These I'd probably put at 400. And so olive oil, is good till around 400. If you're going above that, then maybe choosing an avocado oil or something that has a higher heat temperature. So 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and I'm gonna just kind of gauge that with my eyes. And then I'm going to stir that up with the potatoes, just kind of toss them so that they get evenly coated with the oil. And then this is the magic step to really crisping them up, is using some kind of starch. So I like to use arrowroot powder or tapioca flour. You can also use cornstarch, but these arrowroot or tapioca are my 2 preferred ones. And that is when you coat the potato or the roasting vegetable with that, it really helps to crisp it up. It's a little secret magic you can add in. So it goes on after the oil, and I'm going to add to this tapioca, I have a tablespoon of tapioca flour, and I'm going to add about a teaspoon of some garlic powder. And then you can kind of throw in whatever you want. Like I'm gonna do a little bit of black pepper, and sometimes I'll go grab a sprig of rosemary and chop it up from the yard, or some other kind of fresh herb. And you can really be generous with the herbs. It's hard to go overboard with them, and they have, especially if you're using the fresh herbs, they have so many good nutrients in them. We tend to be a little bit, I'm doing like half a teaspoon of oregano and around half a teaspoon, it's probably more like a teaspoon, of thyme. I'm gonna add that too. We tend to be a little bit nervous about herb and spice use, I've noticed. We like really measure them, and sometimes if you go to other countries, I've noticed that people are a lot more liberal with their spice and herb use, just kind of tossing in handfuls of this and that. So especially with herbs, feel free to kind of add them as you want. So I have here, I'm not adding the salt yet, so it's just my herbs and my arrowroot flour. And so I'm going to toss that on and give it a good toss to kind of coat the potatoes in that mixture. And then from there, I'm going to add a little bit of salt. And I'm using a whole sea salt, so you're getting more minerals in there. Again, about a teaspoon of sea salt than you would with just a regular iodized salt. And a little less sodium too, because you have a wider range of minerals. So you can add a little bit more sea salt than you would just a normal regular table salt. So here I have the potatoes now salted, added the tapioca flour on it, and I'm going to put it on a cookie sheet with some parchment paper. You can also grease the cookie sheet, but I don't, especially when you're doing a crispy vegetable, they can get sticky, you know, sticking to the sheet, and that can be annoying to clean, right? So I do a parchment paper that is resistant to high heat. And then, or you can also do a silpat mat. And the other key here is to make sure that none of your roasting vegetable is overlapping. So you really want it to not be, I mean, they can be touching a little bit, but the less it's touching and definitely not overlapping, the more evenly it's gonna roast and the crisper each piece can get. And again, this works with sweet potatoes or squash, whatever you're roasting, you can do the same, any kind of starchy vegetable, you can do the same method. So that's what it looks like. And that'll pop in the oven for about 30 to 40 minutes. And if you really want to get serious about the crisping action, you can flip it or kind of give it a stir halfway through to help rotate it onto the different sides. The last tip too with those is to let them rest on the baking sheet for at least 5 minutes, and that'll help them crisp up just a little bit more, and then serve them right away. And they are delicious served with chimichurri, which is going to be the next thing that I put together. And I'll be using this flat leaf parsley from the CSA. It started to flower a little bit, but it doesn't really change the flavor of it. It's still totally fine to eat. We don't see this too often in the market. I've been posting a lot lately about kale rabe, or different colored rabe, and it's really just when the stem starts to flower, it's called the rabe, and it does mean that the nutrients are starting to pull up into that, but it makes for often times like a really extra delicious herb or flower. So even if you see it starting to flower, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Let's see, unless it's a root, then that's a different story, but we won't get into that right now. The thing that it does do when it's a little bit older like this is that the stem tends to be a little bit more woody. So where you might be able to use the whole stem, like oftentimes with a bunch of parsley, if it was a young parsley, I would use the entire stem. Or, you know, young cilantro, I use the entire stem. But since this is a little bit of an older parsley, or just toward the end, right? It's starting to want to go to seed. I'm going to kind of just take it off the stems, so they're the big woody stem. And then this stem, I'll throw in the freezer with my bag of ends that I use. Any end that I'm like cutting onion off, or when I'm cutting up a leek, anything I'm not using that I know will have some flavor or nutrients retained in it, I throw in a bag in the freezer and I add it to stock. So I always have my stock bag of veggie ends, because you strain a stock after you make it, right? So you can just add, keep that in your freezer and know that these stems are still gonna add some nutrients and some great flavor, even though we don't necessarily wanna eat them raw. So the chimichurri, we're making a really classic chimichurri today. There's a lot of fancy variations of it that you can find online. But you know, I like today we wanted to stick with the original version and keep that wisdom of just staying simple, and then know that you can dress it up and bring that innovation into your kitchen, that new way of doing it, and get creative with that. So that's a really great way to start building on intuitive cooking, is to start with a really basic, simple recipe, and then from there, bring your own spin to it, your own flair to it. And as you continue to do that in the kitchen, that your own flair, your own creativity will build and grow as you get more comfortable with those simple recipes. So a chimichurri sauce was originally, it's an Argentinian recipe, and it was made to go on steak, but it really is a great way. It's such an easy thing to put together and brings just this really vibrant, raw element to a meal. And today we're not using any machine. Most of the recipes online will use a food processor or a blender, and but I really like, that's the reason I like chimichurri. I like that it's simple. I like that I don't have to get out I don't have to get out, there's a pop. I don't have to get out any or dirty any, that's okay, I didn't know what it was. I don't have to get out and dirty any of my cooking machines, right? So it's a really nice, easy one to throw together. So when I'm chopping herbs, I like to bundle them up, like just create a really tight ball. And then with that ball, I kind of come down and thinly slice. So the more tightly you can bundle it, the easier it'll be to do this fine chopping without having to, try to catch all the different little stems and strands of the herb. And you do want, for the chimichurri, for it to be, and then from there you can do the fast chop. And you want it to be pretty small. If you think that a lot of people do use the blender or the food processor, it's good to get this as fine as possible. So with a good chef's knife, just holding the pointed end down, keeping it down as you just quickly rock it back and forth to get a nice fine chop of the parsley. And like I said, this is the very classic version of a chimichurri, but you can do any herbs with it. In fact, on my website, I have a recipe using nettles, and I think I have cilantro on there. So really, you can play with it so much. And any herb that you have on hand can become a good chimichurri, because it's really just, the herb, olive oil, garlic, and some spices. And then, like I said, dressing it up from there. So I'm just putting this in a bowl. And so there's about 3/4 cup that you saw was one bunch of the greens. If the stems were younger, you could use the stems. And then from there, I'm gonna add you could do 3 or 4 garlic cloves. I tend to go a little bit lighter on the garlic cloves because my kids think it gets spicy. But you just put your flat end of the knife on the garlic clove, smash it, and then the paper just kind of peels away, throw it in the sink. It's a really easy way. It's already been almost entirely chopped for you. And then same thing, kind of ball it up and do a quick chop of it. And the nice thing about the chimichurri sauce is that you get the raw, we often cook garlic, right? And that enhances some of the nutrients, but there are some nutrients in it that are really important nutrients that it increases, obviously, to keep it raw. So it's a nice way, chimichurri is a nice way to get that raw garlic in. Okay, so it's pretty finely chopped garlic. So now I'm just gonna scoop that up and throw it in there. And then 2 tablespoons, I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. And just to keep the ratio here, I'm gonna go ahead and measure this one. You can also use red wine vinegar. This is white wine vinegar. It's something, kind of personal preference. Either would work, depending on whatever you have in the cabinet. Probably other kinds of vinegar would even work. Just getting that tang. And then I'm gonna do some oregano, a couple teaspoons of oregano flake. Let's throw that in there. And then the traditional recipe calls for red chili pepper. And so I'm gonna put just a little bit of that again, because my kids are gonna eat it. And that's something that's really personal preference, how spicy you like it. And then about half a teaspoon of sea salt. But what I'm gonna do is first add the olive oil, and you wanna add about half a cup of olive oil. This is a recipe that's really easy to eyeball because it is completely adjustable as you go. It's something that, if you want a little bit more garlic, it's not really it can never be done if you want it to be. You can just keep going with additions. So I'm adding that half a cup of olive oil, and then I'll just kind of mix it up. And from there, I like to do all of my ingredients first before I add the salt, just because the salt is really what brings it all together. You know, it brings all the flavors together. And the way that you know how much to salt something is to, if you taste something and you can identify one flavor really strongly, it means that you need a little bit more salt to help merge the flavors. So the salt is the great flavor integrator. So I like to put everything together and then add a little bit of salt, and then I'll stir it up and I'll give it a taste and see, does anything, you know, really stand out? And it does. So I'm gonna add a little bit more, and I think that'll probably be good. One of the nice things too about not using a machine for this recipe is you don't destroy the olive oil at all, so you can feel free to use a really nice olive oil because you're going to maintain the integrity of the nutrients within that. So when you blend an olive oil, it can separate the fatty acids from the polyphenols, and so it just destroys the nutrients in the olive oil a bit. But when you keep it raw, it's nice. So using a really good olive oil, this is a good recipe to do that. And so I'm gonna taste a little bit more. And it tastes good. Tastes like it's ready to go on top of some roasted potatoes. So that's it. Super simple. It'll mellow, the flavor of it will mellow if you let it sit for a bit. So, you know, if you wanted a more mellow, more integrated flavor that wasn't as bright, putting it in, you know, making it maybe in the morning and serving it that evening or maybe the next day. And it'll last up to 2 weeks in the refrigerator. So you can, if you made a big batch of it, it's something that's really nice to use, you know, as like a dressing for a bowl or a salad. You could use it as a marinade. A lot of people use this to marinade. It's a nice dip to throw on like a cheese board, just to dip raw veggies in, or, you know, like Megan and I did this time, to add to something cooked to get that raw element and a little bit of nice flavor. So additions you can make. Some people add a shallot is a really popular thing to add. You can make it a red chimichurri by adding red pepper or tomato to it. And like I said, you can use almost any other herbs. You can add a lot of different spices and make it your own. But this is your basic chimichurri sauce. So does anybody have any questions about anything?
My mouth is watering.
I wish you could come over for dinner.
We're just missing the aroma.
Yeah, I know.
We
If
need
they
to
can,
have technology where we can.
if they could have that be part of, if they could figure out how to make smell come through Zoom, then we'd never have to do anything in person again, right?
Well, that wouldn't be fun.
I know. Let's not have them do that.
What's interesting, Katrina, is the CSA I got down here for this week had potatoes, had parsley in them. So
Yeah.
It was almost like the same CSA you have.
Yeah, I thought that would probably be the case. And that's why actually putting this online feels kind of exciting, because it opens it up to so many more people than just our community here. So that's cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Did you have something, Becky?
I'm gonna turn this up. I can't hear really. Katrina, when you did the spices on the potatoes and you put the oil on first, I've always blended the oil with a little teaspoon of some type of starch and the herbs. Is there a reason you did the oil first? And then you waited for the salt. Is that the same reason, to sort of balance the flavor?
I think it's just more the layering of coating. But I have noticed that different recipes and different people that do this method mix it up. So I don't know that it's that critical to do the steps, but in my own kitchen, I found that it does work better to do the oil, and then my thought is that the starch can then you're not
Like you're coating it
you're
as you
coating
go.
it and it sticks
Yeah,
to the
so
whole
that's
thing.
all I was asking
Yeah.
is like your mindset was behind that because it does make sense.
Yeah, and then I think the same reason the salt on top of the starch makes sense to me too, because it's also a bigger molecule or a bigger,
That was great, you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And like I said, we have it live today, but next week we're going to go just to the Zoom. So anybody that's watching live, if you want to be a part of this, go on to the link in my bio and you can sign up for our next classes or classes. And anybody that's live, that's on our Zoom today, like I said, if you paid already for this one, it won't start until next week. So this will be free for everybody that joined today. So thank you.
So you are going to do weekly classes or is it every 2 weeks? I can't remember.
We're gonna do every Thursday. I mean, this is our first one. It's a new idea, so we'll see how it goes. But our plan is to do it every Thursday.
That's exciting. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye everyone. Thank you.
Love you.